Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. We are going to go over and kind of recap everything we studied over the last 5 weeks or so. And then next week we'll do our Q&A. So if you have questions, please try to get those to me by this Sunday so I can look over them and make sure that I know what I'm talking about, or at least can get somewhat of a clue of what I'm talking about. So we're going to recap tonight, and then, like I said, we'll move on after next week, Q&A next week, and then we'll move on to our next study, after that. So let's see here. Where are we starting tonight? We are going to start in Psalm 139, if you want to open up there. Psalm 139. All right? Let me make sure. There we go. It's working. All right. Psalm 139. What I want to do is I want to kind of take all of the 3 lessons we've studied over the last 6 weeks or 5 weeks and go through them and kind of recap all of them so that everybody can be on the same page. And then if you have any questions about what happens when we die, you can ask them if we have some time at the end. The last 15 minutes or so, we're going to watch a portion of a sermon from Wayne Jackson, who I realized today is kind of like, I've always wondered why I liked Wayne Jackson so much, but then I realized he's kind of like my grandfather in the faith kind of thing. He was the mentor for Alan Webster, who was the preacher at Jacksonville Church of Christ for a very long time, who has now gone on to be an instructor at Memphis, and he's the one that heads up polishing the pulpit and house to house and all that stuff. But for the last 15 minutes or so, we're going to watch some application of what we've been studying from him. So let's dive in. Psalm 139. So the nature of human beings, okay? What makes a human different from the rest of creation and the animals? I mean, technically, we are an animal, right? We're created the same way, right? So what makes us different? We have a soul, right? Somebody grab Psalm 139, verse 14 for me, please. Psalm 139, verse 14. And the AC's running, so you'll have to speak up a little bit. Psalm 139, verse 14. All right, so my soul. So whenever you look at the Bible, very rarely does the Bible pay only attention to the physical body, right? It always brings in the soul, because the soul is really what matters when it comes to religion and our practicing of our faith and so forth. So if you look at Genesis 1:29, God creates man in his what? In his image. What does that mean? What does it mean for us to be created in his image? Does that mean God looks like us? No, what does it mean? Yeah, we have a spirit, right? We have a personality, we have thoughts and intentions. We're not only guided by instincts, right? We have reason and rational thought and so forth. And so some of that is, emotions. Our emotions are because we're created in God's image, our personalities and so forth, but also the idea that we have something that's bigger than this physical existence, right? Okay, so a human being is made up of a body and a soul, okay? Now, soul and spirit, what's the difference? Yeah, for the most part. Sometimes the Bible will use soul and spirit as different statements, but for the most part, the vast majority of the time it uses soul and spirit. It's interchangeable. And even when it's not interchangeable, like for instance, the Word of God is quick, it's powerful, it's sharper than a two-edged sword, dividing even the soul and spirit, right? So even when it's not using it in an interchangeable fashion, it's still pointing that they're basically the same thing, okay? A lot of people get in the weeds about, the soul does this and the spirit does this and so forth. In the scriptures, that's not really a difference there. So, now, what makes, if a human being is a body and a soul put together, okay? Can you remember what we talked about? I think it was last week or maybe week before last. If the body and the soul are put together and that makes a living being, then what is death? When they're separated, right? So the logical conclusion from that is that when the body and the soul are united, that's life. And then when they're separated, that's death, right? And since the Bible says that He has planted in us a soul from our mother's womb, then that means that we are human beings. We're alive before we're born, right? So the same thing can be said on the opposite end of the spectrum. When the soul and the spirit separate, that is death. So we got two passages here. Somebody grab Genesis chapter 35, verse 18 about Rachel, and then someone else grab James 2 and verse 26. Genesis 35, verse 18 first. While you're opening there, what is the medical definition of death? Does anybody know? What's a medical definition? When the EEG no longer has any electrical brain activity, right? So we put someone on a ventilator or on life support, and then when the brain is gone, when there's no more electrical pulses, then that means that we call that person dead. Now the thing is, the Bible's definition of death, being the separation of the soul and the spirit, is it's the most concise definition of death, but it also, we don't know when it happens, right? When does the soul separate from the body? We don't know because we can't test the soul, right? We talked a few weeks ago about people have tried to weigh bodies. They've tried to put nets over the bodies to try to catch the soul. But the soul or the spirit is not a physical thing, so you can't test it. You can't weigh it and so forth. So medically speaking, we go by when the EEG doesn't have any more brain activity. All right, Genesis 35, verse 18, please. Yep. All right, so Rachel, when she's in labor, she has Benjamin, and then she dies. Her soul leaves. In fact, that's the first thing that the Bible says, right? Her soul was departing because she died, right? All right, James 2 and verse 26. Somebody got that for me? All right, so just like trying to have Christianity without doing something because of it, that's like having the body without the spirit, right? When a body is separated from its spirit, then it's no longer dead. Go ahead.
All right, question. So if you look at Elijah or Enoch, do they typically have a spirit? Or are they
Yes. Yeah, the person is a body and a spirit. Both of them went to be with God and did not leave their bodies. So they never died. Right?
So they still have a body and a spirit?
Yes. So that's important when we get to talking about the resurrection, because for someone to say that heaven is only a spiritual place, you really have, already you have three bodies there. You have Jesus, Enoch, and Elijah, right? So, all right, so when the soul separates from the body, that is death. Then the question comes, what happens after that? All right? What happens after that? So let's dive into this. What happens to the body when the soul is removed? Eventually, what will happen? They'll go back to the dust, right? 2 Corinthians 5, verse 1 there says, "For we know that that if the tent that is our earthly home is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens." All right, and then Genesis 3, verse 19, "By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, For out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. All right? So when the body and the soul are separated, the body does what? It gets buried, or it gets lost at sea, or it whatever. The physical parts of our body will eventually turn to dust. They'll go back to the earth. And our soul will continue to remain, because our soul is not a physical thing, right? Nowhere in the scriptures does it ever say that a soul or a spirit ever ceases to exist, right? That was the first week we went over some of those false ideas. One of those is just annihilation. That after you're dead, if you're not faithful, if you're a wicked person or unrighteous person, your soul just ceases to exist. That's nowhere found in Scripture. That's a modern day teaching that comes mainly from the inability for some, really all of us, to accept that some people are lost. Okay? So, soul and spirit, they separate, the body goes back to the earth. Then what happens to the spirit? What happens to the spirit after the body is gone? Or after it's separated? That was a good one right there. Bless you. Gesundheit. I don't know what Gesundheit means, but I don't speak tongues, so I don't know. Does it mean God bless you? It does? Look at that. I can't speak tongues. I don't know. Somebody Google that for me. Anyways, all right. So when the soul and spirit, or soul and body separate, that's death. The body goes back to the earth. What happens to the spirit then? Can you test the spirit? No. So it becomes what? Unseen, right? Okay, so that's this word. Let's get to this first. Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 7 says, from the dust return, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. All right? So when the soul is no longer in the body, there's no way to see it, there's no way to test it, to analyze it, or anything else, because it is a spirit. And so that's where this term comes in, Hades, right? If you use the King James Version, a lot of times the word Hades is translated hell. That's really an unfortunate translation there. It doesn't mean hell. The word for hell is Gehenna, okay? It is a different thing. It's the eternal resting place of the unrighteous, okay? So Hades is this phrase that is basically just descriptive of a soul when it's not in a body, okay? It means unseen. The etymology is really kind of questionable on that, of where it came from and so forth. But the word is a combination of two words that means not seen, okay? It's used 10 times in the New Testament. We're not going to go to all those, but it is used a bunch in the New Testament. And like I said, most of the time it's translated hell in the King James. That is mainly because the King James was translated. Fun fact, does anybody know when King James was translated? The King James Version. Yeah, the first iteration of the King James Version. 1611, right. There's been, I think, 9 or 10 different reworkings of that. Now it's in the public domain. It's open to be used. It'll never be updated again. So this word Hades, okay? Can anybody tell me the best passage in the New Testament that gives reference to this idea of a soul being in the state of Hades? It's a parable, maybe a story, told by Jesus. The rich man and Lazarus, right? The rich man and Lazarus. So let's go over there. Luke chapter 16, verse 19. Luke 16, verse 19. All right, let's read this. There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. The poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side, or Abraham's bosom in some translations. The rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. And he called out, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. But Abraham said, Child, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish. And besides this, between us and you, a great gulf, or a great chasm or gulf has been fixed, in order that those who would pass from here to you may not be able, and none may cross from there to us. And he said, Then I beg you, Father, to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, lest they also come into this place of torment. But Abraham said, They have Moses and the prophets, let him hear them. And he said, No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. And he said to him, If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they. Man, we got something going around now. If they don't hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead. All right, so the rich man and Lazarus are both in the state of Hades, okay? Lazarus is in what part of heaven? Or what part of eternity? Let me rephrase that. Lazarus is in what part of eternity in this story after he dies? What's it called? Abraham's bosom, or Abraham's side, okay? That's just an idiom that talks about the honor and the rest that is applied there. And then torment, if you look at the passage, it says, the rich man also died and was buried, and being in this state of Hades, he looked and he was in torment, right? Okay, so that word there is Tartarus. It's synonymous with Gehenna. He's in hell, and he looks up and he says, he sees Lazarus in heaven, and he says, I want to go there, or I want him to come here and help me. And Abraham says that's not possible, right? Because once someone dies, then the old preachers used to call it their what'd they call it? Their time of testing or something like that is done. There's no way to change that, right? This isn't like the Catholic idea of purgatory, where you are in this third place that then you can either be prayed up to heaven, or you can earn your salvation after being in purgatory for being there so long and so forth, that you are then accepted into heaven. You're either one of the other places. You're either in honor or you're in dishonor. That's what the book of Daniel will talk about here in just a little bit, okay? All right, so body and soul are separated. The spirit then is in this unseen. It's not able to be seen. And the descriptive of that is the Greek word Hades. We could easily call it the unseen. That just means that there's no way to physically see a person that, while their soul is still alive, for lack of a better term, they're not in their body. And that's how we, as physical beings and carnal beings on earth, that's how we interact with people, right? All right, so now let's go on to another passage. Acts chapter 2, verse 27. Acts 2 is a quotation of David, and Peter is using that on the day of Pentecost to talk about Jesus, because David is obviously talking about Jesus. He even says, I can't be talking about David because we know where David's buried at this point, right? His body was corrupted, okay? But Jesus' body was not. Acts 2:27. Somebody read that for me, please. All right, so you will not abandon my soul to be just unseen. Was Jesus' body in the tomb for 3 days? Yes. Where was his spirit? It was unseen, right? we're actually never given any indication of where it is. But it was unseen for 3 days, okay? But there's only two options, and that is punishment or rest. There's either Abraham's side or there is torment. There's heaven or there's hell, right? Those are the only two options for people when they die, okay? So let's talk just a quick second about what if Hades is an actual place, not a state of being, but a place where the best way I can describe it is the body and soul separate. Those then go over here to this third place, which is a new place called Abraham's side and a new place called torment. And they wait there. And then at the judgment day, Jesus is going to come back and get them, and we're going to have the judgment day. And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. Go over that again here in just a little bit. What if Hades is a real place, okay? There's three main problems with that, all right? Can anyone give me any idea of what might be a problem with Hades being a literal waiting place, which is what a lot of us have heard, especially in just Christianity as a whole. It mainly comes out of that idea of Catholic purgatory, that there is this separate place that is the waiting place for judgment. They call it purgatory. A lot of Protestant churches will call that Hades, or this Hadean realm type thing. Can anybody think of any problems with that being a literal place? Can you think of any? All right, think about this. Does God ever do anything extra? Can you think of any time when God did something extra? He did something that was superfluous or pointless. Do what? Apart from the duck-billed platypus? It's got a purpose. I don't know what it is, but I'm not a biologist. I'm a preacher. Right, so there's this idea in the Bible called the law of divine economy, which just is, laws are just what we recognize, okay? What we've been shown or seen or so forth. So like the law of gravity is a law because we've never seen it any other way, right? All right, so the law of divine economy is a big phrase that just means we've never seen God do something extra, okay? He does exactly what he needs at exactly the right time for exactly the right reason, right? So if Hades is this place over here to the side where you already know where you're going, right? If you're in Abraham's bosom and Hades is a literal place, where are you going at the judgment day? To heaven, right? You already know it's heaven, right? What's the difference between Abraham's bosom and heaven? There is none that we can find. It's the place of rest, okay? If Hades is the literal place and you are unrighteous and you go to torment, where are you going to be at the judgment day or after the judgment day? You're going to be in hell, right? Okay, so the law of divine economy says, why would God do that? Why would he make a secondary place, or a third place rather, that is a holding place when you already know where you're going, and to some degree you already know why you're going there, right? The rich man and Lazarus, what does Abraham say to the rich man? He says, you are there because in your time you did what? You received your good things and Lazarus bad things, right? So to some degree we already know why, and we already know where we're going. So the law of divine economy says that wouldn't make sense. Number two, if it is a literal place, then did Jesus die for the sins of the people under the Old Testament? Yes or no? Yeah. So if you were a faithful Jewish person, this was something that really I had a hard time understanding when I was growing up, not in the church. And then after I became a Christian, I still didn't really understand it. But that's this. If you die before Jesus is resurrected, and you're a Jewish person, if salvation only applies to Christians, then billions of people, God created mankind and let us exist for thousands of years with hundreds of generations, only to know that they were being lost, right? So the resurrection of Jesus saves all from their sins, right? So those people in Hades, that if it's a literal place over here to the side, those people in Hades, when Jesus died, they received salvation from their sins because they were righteous, right? So they receive salvation. The only thing they haven't done is face the judgment day, okay? So that's reason number 2 why, logically speaking, Hades cannot be a literal place. Number 3 is it's never used like that in the New Testament. Hades is used 10 times in the New Testament, one of which is the rich man and Lazarus. Rich man and Lazarus doesn't say that Hades is a separate place. It says that they are both in Hades. They're both unseen. Okay? Nowhere in the New Testament does it say that Hades is a third place, a waiting place for the judgment day. All right? So those are the 3 reasons why Hades can't be a literal place. All right? So when the soul and the body separate, that's death. The righteous go to be with Jesus. The wicked go to torment or to Gehenna, to hell. They're all in the state of Hades. They can't be seen, but they're missing something. Okay? They're missing something. Jesus, does Jesus look like he looked? Does Jesus look today like he looked when he was living? Think about it. When the disciples see Jesus after he's resurrected, do they recognize him? Yes. Sometimes, there's a couple times, like, for instance, the road to Emmaus, the 2 men don't recognize him, but also they never followed Jesus. They heard about who he was. So they never saw who he was. Okay? The disciples, on a couple occasions, they're eating with him or they're spending time with him, and then they realize who he is. And we're not really given why they don't recognize him. But when Thomas sees Jesus, what does he say? I'll believe it if I can put my hand in his side and feel the nail holes, right? So he has a literal physical body, right? When he resurrected to go to heaven, did he take that body with him? Yes. Now it was changed. We'll talk about that here in just a second. It was changed, but his body went with him. When Jesus was resurrected in Acts chapter 1, or ascended into heaven in Acts chapter 1, his body wasn't left here. He took it with him. He was in his body, right? All right, so 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 14. And I put 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 14 this week and didn't put 2nd, because y'all were giving me a hard time last week about that. No. All right, 1 Thessalonians 4:14. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. Okay? So Jesus took his body to heaven. Enoch and Elijah took their bodies to heaven, right? So heaven, in some way, is able to have physical bodies there. How? I don't know. Okay? If God can create the universe with the voice of his mouth, then he can put physical bodies in heaven. Now, Jesus' body had been changed, right? But at the judgment day, Jesus is going to come back and he's going to bring with him all those who have died. The righteous, in fact, 1 Thessalonians 4:14 says he's going to bring back those who have fallen asleep, or those who, remember a few weeks ago we talked about that phrase is always talking about the physical body. So he's going to bring back the souls who are in Hades, who are in the state of the unseen, and he's going to bring them back to be with, to meet their bodies. Their bodies are going to be resurrected. If you look at, somebody get these 2 verses for me, please. Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, and Matthew 10, verse 28. Somebody get Daniel 12:2 for me, please. Daniel 12:2. All right, so those who are asleep will awake. Well, what's that talking about? That's talking about their physical bodies, right? Matthew 10, verse 28. Somebody read that for me, please.
Fear not him that kills the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both soul and body.
All right, so in hell, that's the word Gehenna, so you're good with that. In hell, what's going to be there? The soul and the body, right? So the physical bodies are going to be resurrected, okay? At the judgment day, we're going to be reunited with all our bodies. Our souls will be reunited. John chapter 5, verse 28, that passage up there says this. Do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming when all who are in the tombs will hear his voice and come out. They're going to come out of the tomb. Is the soul in the tomb? No, what's in the tomb? The body, right? The bodies are going to come out of the tombs, hear his voice. Those who have done good to the resurrection of life, those who have done evil to the resurrection of judgment. All right? And then, for time's sake, we're not going to read it, but 1 Corinthians 15, verse 39 through 49 says that our bodies are going to be changed. Paul says we will be like him. We don't know what that's going to be. We don't understand the difference, but he says it is sown corruptible and it is raised incorruptible. So when we're resurrected, when our bodies are resurrected and our soul is reunited with our body, then our bodies will be incorruptible. They'll never die again, okay? Philippians 3, verse 21 says this, who will transform our lowly body to be like his glorious body by the power that enables him even to subject all things to himself. All right? So, when the soul and the body separate, that's death. The soul is then unseen, and the righteous go to be with Jesus. The unrighteous go to be in torments. At the judgment day, Jesus is going to bring back all those souls, resurrect the bodies, reunite the bodies to the souls, and then we will face the judgment. So then the question is, we're not going to get to the video. That's all right. I'll send it out so y'all can see it at least. Then the question becomes, what is the point? If we already know where we're going, which you do, even if Hades is a literal place, we already know where we're going. We already know to some degree why we're going there, because we'll still recognize ourselves. We'll understand our life. We'll remember our life. Remember in Luke 16, Abraham tells the rich man to do what? To remember his life. So we'll understand why we're there. So what's the point of the resurrection and the judgment day? Do what? It's to make that final declaration of why, to give all of the reason for it, and to understand what we've done in our lives, right? That's the judgment. He's going to read the books. Our lives are going to be laid out in front of us, and we're going to know one way or the other why we're going there. But also, the resurrection is also important because if all of these passages, like John 5, Daniel 12, Matthew 28, all these passages talk about our bodies being in heaven or hell for eternity, there's got to be a time when that happens, right? Now, why did God not just, when we die, he just takes our body there? I don't know. Here's my thoughts on this. This is just me speculating here, okay? There's no biblical indication of why he didn't do it that way. But here's my thoughts on this. Does God give us ample evidence and opportunity to obey him? Yes. But he also gives us the choice to not obey him, correct? If God were to take the bodies when a person dies, first off, we couldn't die, right? Because what is death? Separation of the soul and the body. So in order to die, you got to have that separation. Otherwise, Elijah and Enoch didn't die. They never died, right? Okay, so in order to have death, you got to have the separation. But why not, if we get to a certain age or, whatever, God just takes our body with us. My thought on that, my speculation is that might be too much evidence. Okay? God has given us the evidence we need to obey him. He's given us the ample opportunities to obey him. He's not going to force our hands. So that's just my thought, and there's holes in that, and I understand that there are holes in that. But for one reason or another, in the infinite knowledge of God and the sovereignty of God, he decided to set it this way, that we die, our bodies and our souls are separated until the judgment day when he reunites them, and then that is when the eternal decision is made for every person. All right, go ahead. Yeah, just because he can doesn't mean he will, yeah. Yeah, so that's a good way to kind of sum it up. But also, I understand there are holes in my speculation there, okay? I don't know why he did it. I'm just shooting from the hip to try to figure out why he did it. But even then, it doesn't really matter in the long run. This is how he set it up to be. That we die, our spirits are unseen. They go to be with Jesus. Remember the 7 times we saw Bible writers in the New Testament saying that when they died, they were going to be with Jesus. There's no reason, no indication of why they're different than anyone else. And the ample evidence is that all people, when they are, all righteous people, when they're separated from their body, their soul goes to heaven to await the judgment day. He brings them back from heaven. That's what John 5 says. Do not marvel at this. The hour is coming when all the tombs are going to hear his voice. They're all going to be resurrected. And then 1 Thessalonians says Jesus is going to bring them back with him, right? And then he's going to resurrect the wicked. Those souls are going to come back, be reunited. And then for eternity, we will be in our bodies. It'll be different, but we'll still look the same. We'll be recognizable. The rich man recognizes Lazarus, right? It's interesting to me that in the story of the rich man and Lazarus, Lazarus doesn't see the rich man. Why? Again, this is me speculating here, but if you're in heaven and you can see people being punished in hell, that denigrates the rest and the place of honor of heaven, right? Heaven is a place where the Bible says there's no tear, where there is complete rest and happiness. We are praising God all day long. The book of Revelation says, and so because of that, he put this gulf there. It is interesting to me that the rich man can see Lazarus, but Lazarus can't see the rich man. That also, whenever I preach the rich man and Lazarus, I also talk about that part of the eternal punishment that we face if we're unrighteous is the constant reminder that we had the ability to stay faithful. We had the ability to follow God, and we didn't do that, right? All right, so any questions about that or any questions about anything we talked about? We got 2 minutes left, and then I'm going to take a break. I'll send this video out so everybody can see it. But any questions? All right, let's go ahead and take a little break. I saw the kids out there. Oh, you got a question? Of course. No, I'm just playing. Yeah, so purgatory is a Catholic concept. The Catholics are going to get mad if I describe this because I'm not a Catholic, and so you're not allowed to talk about Catholicism if you're not a Catholic. But here's the basic premise of purgatory, okay? Purgatory is this separate waiting place that everyone goes to that isn't utterly righteous or utterly wicked. They go there, and by the lighting of candles, by the saying of prayers, by good alms in purgatory, you can earn your way to heaven or you can earn your way to hell. So it's like a second chance almost. It is the fundamental concept that led to the things like Mormonism has the 3 degrees of heaven, the celestial, terrestrial, and telestial kingdoms, where the really, really good people go to the celestial kingdom, but then the somewhat good people go to the telestial kingdom, and then the somewhat worse people than them go to the terrestrial, and so forth. It came from purgatory. And I tend to think the idea that Hades being a literal place also came from purgatory, which started, as best I can tell, you know, a Catholic scholar is going to be able to give you like the exact time, but best I can tell, in the Middle Ages is when the idea of purgatory happened or started coming about. But it's basically a place where you can earn your way. So that's why Catholics sometimes will go to church, they'll go to Mass, and they'll light a candle for so-and-so in case they're in purgatory, because eventually enough candles being lit means you get to go to heaven. And they don't know how many candles that is. But that's also the idea for the Mormonism concept of being baptized. You know, you pass away, you never got to be baptized, so I'm going to be baptized for you because you're in their version of purgatory and you need to get to heaven, right? All right, so let's go ahead and take a little break, and we'll get started with our Devo here in just a little bit. Thank y'all. Well, I'll go ahead and start taking prayer requests while we're waiting on them to come over. What prayer requests do we have tonight? First off, before we get started, we need to be praying for Miss TJ's dad, who fell. When was that? Friday or Saturday? Last Wednesday. Okay. He fell and broke his hip, and then had surgery, and is not doing well at all. So please be praying for him. They did call hospice in, so please keep Miss TJ and her family in your prayers, especially this week. Also, Loretta Hood, who we've been praying for, is still hospitalized with pneumonia on a ventilator, so be praying for her and her husband, Melvin. Lauren Wright had one of her surgeries, but she's got more coming, right? So be praying for Lauren. Anybody else have any other prayer requests? Yes, sir. All right. Kathy, who is one of Kyle's co-workers, had knee surgery today for a torn meniscus, so be praying for her. Anybody else? Yep. Gary had eye surgery Monday? Was it Monday? All right, Gary Adams. Anybody else have any others? Yes, ma'am. Do what? All right. Angie's dad, Melvin Copeland. He's been sick for a while now, right? So keep him in your prayers. Anybody else have any others? All right.
Completely unrelated secular.
Yes, sir.
If you have any interest in seeing the film that was filmed in downtown Columbus, it opens Friday. John Travolta is in it.
Oh, yeah.
It's
I forgot
very
that one.
much Downtown Columbus, you'll recognize. Filmed it in the Synovus downtown main branch. A lot of it, so you can watch it.
What kind of movie is it?
I don't think it's family friendly, but Cash Out is what it's called. It's a bank robbery flick. Fast cars. Filmed in, much of it is filmed in Columbus, although they call it Seattle. So, yeah, so it opens Friday. It's opening only at the Lucas Cinemas on Fort Ridge. So,
Oh, man, you got to go through a background check to watch the movie.
filmed in Columbus. When in the trailer, if you watch the trailer,
Yeah.
you're like, I know where that is. I know where that is. I know where that is.
That was so weird. When we lived in Macon, they recorded the Need for Speed movie in Macon, and we literally went just so we could see the parts of Macon. But yeah, I forgot old John Travolta recorded a movie here. Yeah, about 2 years ago. They also, it should be coming out soon. All right, the guy that was on Left Behind, the movies, Kirk Cameron. What's his sister's name? Candace Cameron. She recorded a movie here around the same time, and it should be coming out soon too. And I'm 62% sure that there's a shot where I'm walking in the background on accident. They were recording, and I got in trouble for walking through there because I didn't realize they were recording. So I'm hoping I make the cut, and if so, I'm gonna send them a bill for my extra. Yeah, I will never make that movie.
One of my clients' homes is one of the locations for a lot of filming, and they gave him $100, and he got to hang out with John Travolta. That's all he had. He said, "We have to pay you. What do you want?" He said, "I want $100, and I want to meet John Travolta."
I got so many questions for John Travolta. That's cool. So if you want to get a background check, go on base to watch to watch John Travolta. Why is it only going out on those movie theaters? I wonder.
Probably also going direct to streaming. It's not going to be a good thing.
Oh. So, like most of John Travolta's movies. Um, all right. Yeah. So that'll be fun though. That'll be a cool little thing to look at. I remember when that movie came out with filmed in Macon. I was like, "That's the car wash. I get my truck washed there." It was cool. Anyways, all right. So prayer requests. Miss TJ's dad, especially Loretta Hood, Melvin Copeland, Miss Angie's dad, Kyle's co-worker Kathy, Mr. Gary. Anybody else have any others? All righty. Ron has our invitation tonight, and was one of the Tablet Boys doing a song? I was told you already picked one out. 881. Open up to 881, please. All right, Ron. I'm going to leave that there for you. You got to turn the mic. I forgot to turn the mic. I hope I get in the background of the movie. I'm going to make a solid fishing out of that.
Well, as you know, tomorrow's not promised. Not even the next 5 minutes is promised. We just don't know when the Lord will call us home. So we have to be ready. And that means that if we have done something wrong, or we said something wrong, we always have to have the ability to be able to repent. Ask the Lord for forgiveness of something that we may have done, known and unknown. If there's anyone here tonight that have not obeyed the gospel, don't wait any longer. For those of us that have obeyed the gospel, we have to continue to fight the fight. Because we don't know that Satan is looking at us from every angle that we can think of. Now is the opportunity, if you need prayer, to come forward as we stand and sing the song that has been selected.
881. First verse. Let's see. I'm satisfied.
Just cause we low, a little silver and a little gold. But in that city where the lights will shine, I wanna go one that silver line. I got a mansion just over the hilltop in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we'll never more wander, but walk the streets that are pure as gold.
Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this day. Thank you for this opportunity we've had to gather together and study another portion of your word, Lord. We pray that as we go throughout our days, we understand what happens in death, how we might use that to bring people closer to you. We're so thankful